let us get started. For my students, if you can put your microphones on, off and your video on, that makes it a lot more rewarding for those of you who have joined in. What I would like to do is just start by welcoming and thanking our industry partner. So these are the guys from Family Medical Practice. I'll get them to tell you a little bit more about their business, but the particular business that we're focusing on is the Star 9999 business. And the framework kind of theme that we have for a problem that some of us are starting to fall in love with is the question about how to sustainably fund an ambulance service in Vietnam. And so the students have actually already done some work, and I've actually shared some of your work, not all of it. It would drown our poor partners. They wouldn't like us anymore. I've shared a little bit of that work with them. So the questions that each of the groups came back to me with, I've consolidated those into a bit of a list, which I'm going to use to facilitate our discussion. And then also I've shared 3 of the journey maps. Now, the 3 journey maps I shared, the reason I chose them was not that they were the best or the worst. They were pretty good. In fact, they're very good, but more because they focused on the problem that I suspect, and the industry partners here with us to talk about it, that the industry partners most interested in solving at the moment is, but part of what we're here to do is really fall in love with our problems. So for Rafi, Susan, Ian in particular, design thinking is an approach to solving problems. And it's very much focused on using creativity and using different approaches to innovate in complex problem scenarios. But it does that through primarily really making sure from the very beginning that you're solving the right problem, that we don't jump to conclusions or to solutions too quickly, that we really do a deep dive into the problem. So the language I often use is falling in love with the problem. I think about it like our problem is like our newborn baby. And when they're born, we love them so much and we want so much for them, but we're not specific about that usually. So we want them to have a happy life, and that might mean getting a good education so they have interesting and challenging jobs. It might be finding the right partner for them at some time in the future. So I'm looking at Jonathan, who's turned into a talking ambulance. And yeah, so we're really just trying to get to know this problem so that we find the right solution for it. And so we're at the stage where the students have done a bit of research themselves. They've gone out into the world. They've done some academic research. They've read some papers about how ambulance services work generally and how they work specifically in Asia. They've thought about what the process of calling an ambulance is, of subscribing, and a range of different things. And so now what we want to do is get to know you a little bit more and ask you a little bit more about the business. But can I start by asking you to each introduce yourselves just briefly and to tell me one thing, what you think the most important problem that my class can help you with today. Can I start with you, Rafi? Can you introduce yourself?
Yes. Okay, so I'm the owner of the company, and I'm basically the mind behind this project. I'm a physician from one side, but I'm a businessman on the other side because I run this operation. The biggest problem, I think today, looking at it backwards, the biggest problem is cultural. Not economic, not anything else, but a pure cultural issue.
Excellent, thank you. And you're originally from South Africa, is that? No, Israel.
No, I'm from Israel.
You're from Israel, yeah. So, sorry. You're South African, aren't you, Ian?
Well, I was born in Scotland, but I spent 40 years in South Africa, so basically South African at this stage. My job is to ensure that whatever decisions we make are financially sustainable and Rafi is the entrepreneur, and he's the one that comes up with the ideas. It's my job to have a look at those ideas and transform the ideas into reality if they are financially sustainable, and if they make good sense for the business. I agree with Rafi. Looking at this, I looked at the questions the other day and I jotted down some notes. And also when I looked at what is hindering the kickstart of this business, and a lot of it is cultural, and I agree with that. A lot of it is cultural. There are other elements that certainly need to be addressed, and the biggest one is there is no private ambulance network anywhere in the world that survives without government contracts. And that's something we need to understand. You will never sustain a private ambulance business on subscriptions and people using it alone. You have to have contracts. But
so actually,
our business from a private point of view has been hindered somewhat by cultural norms.
Okay. One of the things I wanted to mention is the questions that I sent you, the version I have has been updated slightly because time difference, etc., and the speed at which these guys have to answer my questions. There are some additional ones that I have around regulation and government relationships that came in last night from Team Difference. You're all getting names now. I much prefer to give you names than numbers. I'm going to leave Jonathan till last, actually. Susan, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, hi. Basically, I support the CEO's vision, management's vision, to implement anything. So basically, our role is to help implement strategies and make sure that it reaches the audience. So our role is basically a more supportive perspective. And
you take a lead in marketing, is that right?
Yes,
yeah.
That's correct.
And so, well, with a marketing hat on, what do you see as the biggest problem you need to solve for this business?
This is one of the hardest projects that I've ever worked on, because we tried various strategies. You know, we first started the project thinking, okay, well, we need to start from targeting just the districts that we could manage, and then we grew our districts. We communicated in different ways, and I don't know if Dr. Jonathan has shared with you our latest short animated video, where it's come to is for us thinking maybe it's difficult for people to understand because there are many aspects to this service, but viewership has been incredible. So we've also tried creative thinking, implemented creatively, yet using very simple language, which is modern animation. And we have yet to see where this is going to lead to.
Actually, and that's a question I want to come back to, is that measuring and testing. But let's make sure. So I left Jonathan to last because he's basically your classmate as well. I'm not sure if you were going to overlap. You're about halfway through your MBA, right, Jonathan?
Yes, six more courses to go.
So I'm not going to ask you what your favourite class is so far, because I'll tend to be embarrassed. But so Jonathan and I met when he was in this class a year ago. So you can see how I don't leave you alone. All those emails you get, they keep coming when you're no longer my student. So, Jonathan, can you introduce yourself and tell us what you see as the biggest problem from a physician's point of view?
Yes, I'm Jonathan. I'm the chief pediatrician in the Family Medical Practice Clinic. I'm currently an EMBA student in RMIT. So I get to look at things from both medical and business perspectives, from a student perspective, which is very interesting. I actually used to work as a paramedic in a private ambulance service in Israel back in the late 90s. And that service was mainly for members membership-based ambulance services, mainly for cardiac patients. And it was a successful business at first, but it was very, very hard to sustain it later on, because in Israel, there are very good public ambulance services, unlike Vietnam. There's a big difference between ambulance services, emergency ambulance services in other countries like the US, Israel, Europe, and what you can find here in Vietnam. And this was actually the reason why Rafi decided to start this kind of ambulance services in Vietnam. The big difference is the public ambulances you find here when you call 115 or you call other hospitals, the ambulances are basically used to transfer you from home to the nearest hospital, while our ambulances actually provide the whole medical emergency service on the spot. We have practically a mobile ICU unit that can take care of any medical emergency on the spot. If you have a cardiac arrest, if there was a near drowning case, our team can take care of it in the field and sustain life in the field before transferring the patient to the hospital. This is the major difference between our services and the public ambulances that you can find here. The big problem is, as Rafi said and Ian said, it's the cultural aspect. It's very, very hard to convince people here about the need for this kind of service.
So you're all sticking on the, like, culture is clearly the most important problem to solve. I want to dig into that a little bit in a minute, but before we do that, I just want to get some background questions to make sure that we're all on the same page. And again, amongst yourselves, whoever's going to be the best to answer this, the question is why this business? What makes your business worth having separate from a government service? One of the comments a number of students made in their observations, I just got to mark their papers the other day for the first thing, was, is this actually something, should you have a private ambulance service at all? Isn't this something that the government should do? So I'd really like you to just explore that a little bit. Sorry, Rafi, I can see you champing at the bit there.
Yeah, look, let me just put it more chronologically in place, okay? Yes, for me, it was a process of thinking. Now, on one side, I'm a physician. On the other side, like Jonathan said, I'm coming from a country where ambulance service is something that you dial and you put the phone, and 7 minutes later or 8 minutes later, because there is a time frame of response, you hear outside the siren coming in. That's an ambulance service. Like you used in any OECD country, like in Australia, like in every other place. So I have this in my background. The other side, I'm having an operation and I'm saying, okay, if I have already 3 cars running because I need ambulances in my clinic for my patients, what does it take me to take few more cars and reposition myself in a junction where I can monopolize, and I'm saying it very frankly and directly, monopolize the emergency response services in the city. Now, what is my competition? I don't have competition because I have a limping, substandard, completely substandard, ailing, rickety-tickety fleet of cars which barely drive, dirty and unequipped, equipment-wise, unequipped professionally any way you want it, which never comes. And that's the answer why people, there was a question why people put people in taxis. They put, it's a direct response of the public for an unresponsive service. So they go on the taxi. And I thought, okay, it takes X time to reach work. Every time it takes longer. There's more cars. There's more traffic. You can't get through. There are emergencies. Why don't we get few more cars and turn the whole pyramid on its head? In other words, get more cars, create a service, and not only we monopolize it, but we actually can maybe see more patients through the service. The outcome, the public gets a better service, we get a good name and more patients, we in a way monopolize and we control kind of the traffic of patients, the severe patients in this city, and we save lives. What better?
And you make money, presumably, at some point.
The money part was not so large, because if you need 5 more ambulances, it's about $600,000. What is? Now, you can't start such a service just by ringing a phone. Okay? So you need to prepare. It's like a hospital. You can't open a hospital with one department and tell people, no, only these people can come in. So you need to make an alarm center. How does it work? So actually, this car comes with a very, very big, thick envelope of training, I wanted something that will be exactly copy-paste of what we have in the United States. And that is what we basically have now. In response, in time, in everything. The only thing I didn't take into account is a karma approach, is a lot of other things which are very, very cultural. I can tell it later.
Yeah.
Which basically hinder this project, because when you look at it, there is it's wonderful on the paper.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
It is great, and it works. It just doesn't work in the volumes that you would expect people to jump on it.
I think one of the things, if I may just jump in here, one of the things is there is no ambulance service in Vietnam. It's a patient transport system. There is no ambulance system as we know it in the West.
Let's dig into this, because we have
but sorry, can I just add on
Vietnamese
that?
students here. So I'd really like to draw out what's the difference. Like,
okay,
let's talk about what the West is. And
let me just add another point in that. We can debate what the service is like. The other problem here is two things. One is we do it the Vietnamese way. And secondly, we know best. So we've actually offered this system to the authorities here. We brought them in, we showed them the alarm center. The difference from our service to the other service, you phone and you say, there's an accident and need an ambulance. There's no question about what's wrong with the patient. Are they bleeding? Are they breathing? Are they this, that, and the next thing? It's, where are you? Okay, we'll send an ambulance if one's available. Our system, as soon as you phone in, you start getting attention, medical assistance from the second you phone in. When we offered this to the local authorities and said, at one point in time, we said, well, we don't want to have the ambulances, but let us run the system and let us direct your ambulances to where they need it. No, we know best, we'll do it ourselves. And that was a big problem. But the difference, what you were alluding to earlier on, what is the big difference? The big difference is the local service is, I have a problem, send a transporter. That's it. You say ambulance, but it's a transporter. There's very little life-sustaining capability of those vehicles. And you think about it, there's 10 million people in Ho Chi Minh City, and there are only few ambulances. And each of the ambulances that operate from here are attached to a hospital, which are attached to a region or a specific location.
But
when you've got 10 million people there and the ambulance is out, you're never going to get one for somebody who's fallen off a motorbike.
Cathryn, if I just may add one sentence.
Please.
and I just want to make it a little bit more sharp. There is no ambulance service as we know it in the West, in the entire Southeast Asia. And I'm not joking. I'm talking Singapore, I'm talking Thailand, I'm talking Malaysia, I'm talking the whole region here where you would expect there is no real ambulance service like you would expect it in the West. The only ones who have something similar to what happens in the West is Hong Kong, and that is because it's ex-British colony. If you think about it, nobody in the region, this is not, I'm not singling out Vietnam. It's when I say cultural, I mean cultural.
So part of that cultural question is around also what people expect when they hear the word ambulance service. So, and that's part of what your animation that Susan was mentioning about before is about addressing as well, is that understanding of what it is that you expect, whether it's transporting or whether it's providing a range of other services. Interestingly, most of the questions, and you will have seen them, and I'd like to talk a little bit about the cost of running this business, but the questions tended to relate to how many buses, or sorry, how many ambulances, I watch too much American TV, how many ambulances you have and how much it costs to put an ambulance on the road. But I'm really interested, and I suspect others are too, looking at their faces, in that communications infrastructure too, the alarm system and what's involved in that. Can you give us a high-level overview? Nothing confidential, clearly.
The alarm system. Look, the alarm system is built on a software which is produced in the United States and is called ProQA. It's not a secret. It's a software which has an algorithms, and this software is used in Australia. It's used by LAS, London Ambulance. So this is an international software. It's not something that is tailor-made for Swaziland. It's an international software. It's a pretty nifty software, very clever one. And you need to be authorized. It's not that they just sell you the software. You basically need to train on this software to be able to respond the way that you expect it to respond. It's a thinking software. It's not an AI, but it's sorry, it's not an IA, but it's a very clever design. Obviously, it needs also people who think logically and don't freak out. It needs a lot of ability to manage a situation, because you know it's from zero to hero can become in seconds. You sit 1 minute and drink a coffee, another minute a call comes and it's a real emergency. A child is drowning, and you have to instruct CPR through the system. Not everybody can do that. And basically, and into that thing, one of the maybe challenges that Vietnam has imposed was, and it's the first question, where are you? Because in Vietnam, many places are not, the road, there's no name, the houses, the numbers are completely upside down. And it's pivotal because everything is built in one way: time, to make sure we dispatch and to make sure that we are standing in the golden standard time. Now, the golden standard time is 8 minutes. I don't think anybody stands in 8 minutes. We're standing at about 11 to 12. The London Ambulance Service is standing at 15 to 17, with a lot of parliament anger and debate. Why is it? But it's because of traffic and because of other restraints. The Americans claim that they are at 7 minutes, but actually to stand in there is no difference between you and a taxi if you can't come immediately. Yeah. You basically have to compete in Vietnam with the taxi. The taxi is available, you're not. And that basically demands you to move the cars and position them in different places in the city so you can reach quicker and respond quicker. The cars are not standing like in Vietnam in a hospital, in a station. Yeah. It's not a fire station that from there we dispatch the cars. The cars are in different areas. And that's how it works. Now, of course, there are all kinds of clever things. You open the phone, you can open if the call drops, to find you through the system. Where are you calling from, to allocate you, all kinds of things that I don't want to go into because they are basically very sensitive in Vietnam because of the nature of the country. But to find you in nowhere and to reach you in these 8 minutes is what we are all about.
And so if I understand correctly, because you have people in the ambulance and equipment in the ambulance, that is that first responder that is actually able to do something more than just transport. When you solve the 8-minute problem, the quicker you get somebody there, then their situation is significantly better from the moment you get there than they would be in a taxi. But if the taxi's there immediately and can get you there.
Well, yes, but I want to say the typical question of every Vietnamese official, typical question is, how long will it take you to reach the hospitals? What do you care? The car is here, the hospital starts here. But they are used to the fact that their system cannot offer anything. And that's why the taxi, because that means that the treatment starts at the hospital. And this is a question which I'm always waiting for, that question, because it never fails. All the officials come and ask the same question. So how long will it take you to reach the hospital in the traffic? What do you care? It's an ICU car. The moment we deploy a team, the moment it starts. Yeah,
interesting. So just generally from a cost point of view, biggest input, so overall proportion of your costs, alarm center compared to the buses, is it a high, is it 10%, 50%?
No, I don't think. I think that the ambulance operation, Ian, maybe you can go into the numbers, because I'm a dreaming guy, not a number guy.
Yeah, look, the whole operation costs us about $30,000 a month to run.
Yeah.
So, and the alarm center, labor costs on that are quite high. Labor costs are probably in the region of 50–60% of that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's vehicle costs and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's what it costs us to run that system on a monthly basis.
Okay, so first subject, so for a lot of people won't have necessarily yet had the opportunity to think about the difference between the capital and the running costs, but I think that gives us a good feel for, if you're bringing in subscriptions in excess of that each month, that puts you in a good position, yeah?
Yeah.
So, awesome. So I guess the next part is actually talking about the funding, because we've framed our question around how to get more subscribers effectively. So how is it being funded now? Straight out of Rafi's pocket? Do you have other investors? What are they looking for?
No, it's funded out of our total business proceeds. So it's
a business unit within the larger practice.
Yeah, it's a cost center within the business.
Okay. And so is this something that you ever imagine having outside investors in? You mentioned earlier that at one stage you actually said to the local authorities, we'll run the center, the alarm center, and we'll use your buses for doing it, ambulances for doing it.
That would be first prize if we could manage the system through the alarm center, where we start giving, as Rafi pointed out, there is no point of care when you get there. It's just you load the patient in the vehicle and you're off. And if it takes 10, 15, 20 minutes, nothing's happening to the patient while you're en route. But if we could manage that process through our alarm center, at least we're adding value from the second you phone in.
Yeah. And actually, Jonathan, as a pediatrician, how do you feel about that? The idea that when you're thinking about it from a practitioner's point of view.
Well, the whole idea of the ambulance services in the West, and this is what we're trying to implement, is the fact that time is life. If time is heart muscle, time is brain, time, the sooner you start resuscitating a patient, the sooner you start treating a heart attack, the sooner you start treating a stroke patient, the better outcome you have. Every minute that passes, the chances of you getting back the patient get slimmer and slimmer. And this is the whole idea of not getting the patient to the hospital, but getting the hospital to the patient. So when the ambulance arrives to the scene, there's already a doctor, a nurse, and a driver who are trained to take care of the situation. They have all the equipment they need on the scene for resuscitation.
So if you won first prize, as Ian called it, and your business is running the alarm centre, but ambulances came from everywhere, so some of them would be really well equipped like yours. Hopefully the best equipped are going where they're most needed under that scenario, and the least equipped are going where the least attention is needed. Would the benefit of the over the phone first aid and assistance, do you see that as important?
Oh, definitely. It's very crucial. First of all, as soon as a person calls the alarm center, he already starts getting instructions on how to start a CPR or to identify the situation. It gives us a better idea of what we're dealing with. All our ambulances are equipped the same way. It's a standard. We don't have different levels of equipment. So all ambulances are equipped with a doctor, a nurse, and ICU equipment.
Right. Wow. Wow. That doesn't happen here. But
exactly. That's exactly. This is exactly the point. Like Rafi said, we are bringing the hospital to the patient, not the other way around.
Yeah.
We start in the treatment at the scene. That gives the patient better chances of survival.
Yeah. Well, yes. Actually, I'm going to ask one more of the investment questions before we move on to talk about the people element. And actually, I'm going to direct this question to Susan, if you don't mind. If suddenly...
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Sorry?
I read this thing and I'm asking, investor in what? What should I tell an investor which comes to invest in my operation? That I have everything on the ground and I am dealing with a cultural issue? When you think about investing, and I was thinking about what you wrote, what the teams write here, invest. Invest in what? Invest in what?
Well, in fact, that's kind of the question I was just about to ask Susan from a marketing perspective. Given that you've all identified as culture, whether that's the government understanding the system in the way that you understand it or that you want to see it be, whether it's individuals making choices between ringing star 9999, how many nines, star 4 nines, I'm going to call it, and calling a taxi instead. A lot of this seems to be, there's clearly this cultural understanding issue. So from a marketing perspective, I was going to ask Susan, well, if you just had some extra money thrown at you right now to do something, particularly in relation to communications or the cultural issue, is there one thing that you would spend that money on right now?
Is this for Rafi or for me?
For you.
For me.
Thinking about it from a marketing perspective.
I would probably do heavy nationwide campaigns and be able to also, of course, sustain the services. Basically bypass the government's 115 services in every angle.
So I'm not asking for ideas that you can necessarily follow through with. What I'm trying to do is let's go out, think about the big things, and then we whittle down into what's important. So a national campaign, what would that be aimed at doing? What would be, if that campaign went perfectly, how would the population of Vietnam be different at the end of it? What would they know that they don't know now? How would they think that they don't think now?
Question.
I think the first thing is to explain to people the difference between our services and what they conceive as ambulances today. This is the major thing. This awareness of the value of time, this awareness that it's crucial to have medical treatment started as soon as possible. We need to switch this image that people have in their head of ambulance services. Once they get the idea of how critical it is, their perspectives will change. But I think this is the first step.
What I'm trying to dig into too is what those perspectives are. Vietnamese people, they're very logical people. They're all about logic and money and getting things organized. Some of the creative solutions to problems that I see when I'm in Ho Chi Minh blow me away. So we've got 10 million really smart people in Ho Chi Minh alone. Clearly, if they've got information, which is relatively easy to get, devil's advocate here, that time adds to your life, what bit don't they get now? What is the cultural difference that you see? Now, students, many of whom are Vietnamese, will already have some ideas around this, but it's interesting to hear it very much from your point of view.
I think the culture. Okay, I would just point just 1, 2, 3, 4. Number one is the value of human life. Okay, if you put a scale, and I'm here very direct, if you put a scale on human value on human life, it's different in every country. It has to do with culture, with regime, with karma, with a lot of things. Happened, okay, happened. Now you don't see it only in the emergencies. You see it in Vietnamese public in cancer too. Why Vietnamese don't go and do, for instance, annual checkups? Why? Only they do it when the boss is paying in the company to do it. Why is that? Because it's a karma. It's okay, happened. Bad luck happened. How do you change that? How do you change the value of human life? And how do you overcome a suspicion? Oh, maybe there's something behind it. Now, these things are specifically brewed in certain countries with certain governmental characters. And that is, when you bypass these things, you might be moving on a different highway. But the most important thing is the value of human life and the karma of, oh, it happened. It's not only resonating on the ambulance service. It resonates in oncology. It resonates everywhere.
Interesting. So again, looking at other areas to think about how people think about luck, actually. Funny, one of the things I know about Vietnamese people is a lot of them like to gamble. So is buying an ambulance subscription, is that placing a bet? It's the bet you hope to lose. Like in Australia, I think it's a kind of insurance, isn't it? You think about it as, this is money that I spend that I hope I never use. I hope you win this bet, because if I win the bet, that just means I've got an ambulance coming to my house, which I don't want. But is there a cultural idea that by
it's a bad bet,
you're bringing some kind of bad luck on yourself? I'd be interested to know what our students think about that. Is that
it's a bad bet. If you take an insurance policy worldwide, they never cover ambulance. Why? Because it's a bet. Now their bet is financial. Here the bet is cultural. Not gonna happen to me. And it's a bad bet. And it might maybe bring bad luck.
If you go back to the marketing and what one of the ways to try and change this culture, it would be nice if we could show statistics and say outcomes. If you use the current system where you phone and you might not get somebody, and then you pile them in an ambulance, and it takes you half an hour to get there, is to show some statistics as far as the likely outcome for critical patients. If you use this system and you get assistance from second one, these are the outcomes from that population. If you use the other one, these are the outcomes of that population. It's almost to shock people into saying, God, we should be demanding this service.
Yeah. Well, and is that an alternative solution? Is a political campaign? I know I'm being devil's advocate.
I don't know how well that would go down.
Oh, that is a very, very sensitive question in a very, very sensitive regime, in a very, very sensitive time. Don't forget that here, that ambulance services in many countries is a national entity.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. Just right now, Israel is under mega pressure of corona. The Israeli ambulance government service is good. Not the great, but it's good. But there are also private companies which are really, really good. And guess what? They are not part of the campaign. Why? Because it's a government thing. Even now, in these days, I mean, with that times of test, and there's a lack of cars to bring patients. No, they're not in.
This is why I love this problem. It's so complex. And
now, just to add, in Hanoi is a very similar thing. So the Vietnamese government solved it by every clinic has to give us an ambulance. Okay, we are not part of it. You will give us. So with such an approach, what you're asking, if 115 will come and tell us, you know, guys, we don't have the cars, or we have the cars, but we don't have the service. Let's cooperate. A PPE. I would drop here after I'm 32 years in Vietnam. I would drop here on the floor.
I hope you don't do that, but I am pleased to know that there's an ambulance if you do.
Yes. Well.
Yeah, it's look, actually, I'm just looking at the time. What I'm going to do is share a screen with you. I don't know if you had a chance to have a look at the pictures that I sent. I sent 3 journey maps. Is there one of them that was closest to what your onboarding experience is? I just really like to just see if we can explore one of them, because we'll run out of time if we try and do them all, for the process of actually getting somebody to buy a subscription.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Why, whoever did it, maybe the students can answer me, why the client was chosen to be a single mom? That really baffled me.
The first one, it is a single mother, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. Why is that? Can someone explain me from the students why such a model was chosen?
That's Anne's one. I'm not sure if Anne's here, actually. Are you here, Anne? Ken?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, it is Anne. Why did you choose single mother?
So it is just a coincidental choice. I just make it on the fly, and I also based on the fact that since she is a single mom, she would likely to she doesn't have like a help from a husband, any help from a husband, so she would value this service a little bit more, because you guys will provide her with all the attention she needs when a medical emergency happens. So yeah, that's why I choose the character here to be a single mom.
Thank you. So one of the things, usually what we would do, because this work was done by the students, in theory, it was supposed to be done before our classes started. So, and one of the things, when you're using journey maps in the real world, we keep building them, and we often use personas, which we've not even really talked about in this class very much. You guys should have read about them, but I bet you haven't. So we build personas out of real data. So one of the things that would be really quite interesting is to look at the students that, the customers that you have, and see what kind of patterns that there are. Like who buys this? Are they, do you have single mothers buying this? Are they mainly expats? Are they mainly local people? Are they middle class? Are they the very wealthy? Are they government officials? Do they work in state-owned enterprises? Do they work for multinationals? Getting a sense of who's already buying, and even more importantly, who says no. Getting a sense of who those personalities are will help the students come up with understanding this regime. So I'm just going to pull this one out. So I think Arne's done the right thing here. He's tried to find someone he can connect with as he's been thinking about who this person is. But to be fair to him, he wasn't at a stage where he had any data to look at that. So this is the purpose of this exercise was for the students to use this kind of visualization tool to firstly organize a process in their minds, but also to think about the emotional hooks that happen at each part of the journey, the decision to buy or to not buy, to subscribe or not to subscribe. Now, many students actually chose as their process what it would be like if they had to call an ambulance, and so I haven't given you those ones because of the nature of the problem we're digging into. Did you have a chance to have a look at them? I've got sort of 3 of them here that have different pieces of information. I thought this one was particularly interesting because it was thinking about annual thinking about annual health checks, which Rafi was just saying a minute ago is actually quite unusual for Vietnamese people to do an annual health check or to. Is that right? Did I understand you correctly?
You're asking whom?
You said before, so I'll start with you, that
yes,
it's
yes,
unusual. Yeah?
yes. It is very. It's when annual checkups become a bit more a business than it becomes a medical necessity, and that's what it is today, not only in Vietnam, also in Singapore and in Thailand as well. You understand that there is the cut of population that doesn't want to go very high. And it doesn't matter, and it's more to do with one thing. It's to do with priority to healthcare. I always say that women will spend more immediately money on a Louis Vuitton bag rather than on fixing their, going to making a health checkup, which is a quarter of that price. It's not about culture this time, this thing. It's not about money. It's about the priorities.
So actually, can I just deal to that too? Because there's money you spend on your own health, but as a parent, there's money I spend on my children's health, or as, at the moment in this corona situation, we look after my mother-in-law who's in her 80s, my parents, 40 minutes away, they're in their 80s, managing their issues, particularly at the moment, is quite complicated. I'm with lots of generations of people living in the same house in Vietnam. Do people spend money on their parents and their children in a way that's different from spending on themselves?
There is definitely a pattern of spending money on the parents, and on the kids. We'll buy for my elderly and I'll buy for the kids. And I always tell them, if you are not healthy, there will be nobody who will be able to help you kids, and there's nobody who will be able to help you parents. So actually it has to be across the board. But the priority goes to the kids and to the parents. It's very cultural, but it's okay. It's out of respect. and out of care for the next generation. I'm not so important in this world as my kids are, my future, and my parents who brought me here. So I'm okay with that. Yeah.
And the data that you have now with who your subscribers are you able to give us in broad terms who they are? Do you have more parents and children, or how does that work?
Well, when we first started the subscription services, in the very beginning, it was mostly expats buying them and subscribing to our services. And then we started to see a slow shift where more and more Vietnamese, as they become aware of our Star 999 services, they start to go, wow, this is really good. And it's not expensive. The first thing they say is, when we approach corporates, for example, they say, yes, I'm going to consider subscribing for my older parents. And we go, what about for yourself? They said, that's later. But for me, my priority is to subscribe for my parents, my family members, my children, exactly as Rafi said. It's a very cultural thing. And now the graph is more Vietnamese than expatriates. I don't know, it's because the per usage price is also very reasonable, which is, you know, for $80 during normal operating hours, and off hours at $225. People are very welcoming of either subscription price or per usage price. So we do see a big shift now, and the Vietnamese are buying. Yes, it's a cultural thing still. They buy more for the elderly and the children.
But they are right, because the population in morbidity and in chance of something that will happen, it's true, are the parents or the kids. And me, I will come later a little bit. So it's a combination of, it's not going to happen to me, I'm okay, but the chances that will happen to my elderly or my kids out of care is higher. So it's negative and positive, kind of.
And so just then moving on to looking at how people become aware. So you've got, the students have seen the longer version of that video. Jonathan kindly sent me 2 links yesterday, which I only shared. She might have sent them the day before, but I've been throwing so many emails at these guys, I'm just adding them in with one. So he sent me a couple the other day. I sent them around this morning, so I doubt anybody would have had a chance to look at the animation one yet. And the other one was a shorter version of that longer section. There's quite a 20-minute video around how the service works, which is really interesting. So there's clearly that kind of stuff. Actually, might just ask the students to just show your hand or put an emoji in the chat or something. Have you had you heard of Star 9999 before you started this process? Started this class? Wave your hand around. So got it. So Ken has, Paul has. Well, I'm just trying to get a basic look. What? Can you go in the chat if you're not prepared to show your faces? So the majority, from the feedback of the assignments that I read, most people hadn't actually heard of it. So there's still a growing, you're clear that there is growing awareness. At risk of actually seeming a little bit too forward about it, in many ways I would have thought that RMIT student base kind of comes from the sorts of families that might be a target audience for you for local subscribers. Though many of them are, from my point of view, quite young. So this is an MBA class, although we've got a couple of execs in here as well. So very few of them have their own children yet. Oh, somebody's seen you at Diamond Plaza. But yeah, so most people weren't aware of it. So there's still like 10 million people. You're going to have a lot of people aware with a lot of people not aware. So one of the things I think is interesting is this is a great group to think about how they might become aware. Sorry, Susan, I interrupted you.
No problem. I wanted to basically re-emphasize again, campaigns such as this requires, a significant amount of funding to support campaigns. It's not it's quite costly to run this business on one side, and we've got to balance it.
Oh, absolutely.
And campaigns as such needs to run on a big budget, to be very honest. And it's not fair for Rafi to have to carry on such a huge budget. And so, the awareness, it also depends, on the channels as well. We've had big challenges trying to get to the Vietnamese market, because the way that the Vietnamese audience reacts is basically to campaigns that are led by key opinion leaders, KOLs. We've discussed this before in our previous meeting months ago, and explained to you that even for a week of awareness via a KOL would cost anything from a starting point of $2,000 and up a week. So you've got to balance at the end of the day, which channels can we really do that? Through social media, there's only to a certain point, because you don't want to start spamming as well. You know how it works. So there are many. It's a complex situation. It's a really
complex situation. And the thing is, I know that one of the things that you do is you provide ambulances at RMIT for open days and other events.
To be as visible as we can in many ways.
All of you students have to. So that kind of awareness question is also about your observation, what you've looked at. Yeah. So, and that demonstrates the complexity of this. It's part of your challenge, particularly if you're going to take down the route of how might we make Vietnamese population excited about the opportunity to have an ambulance service. If you're looking at that kind of problem, you're in an absolutely prime position to think about how can this service speak to you in a way that you'll listen, and how can you listen to them so that you can get the best out of the service available, because you are right in the right space for this.
But the funny thing is, we also get comments from people who are in the same demographics as your students, who knows about our services, and it travels word of mouth, and it goes to very far off provinces as well. So it's very, very difficult to really hone in on who hears about it and who doesn't. Like you say, we try to have our awareness everywhere. We go to RMIT, and yet some students say yes they know, and many of them say we don't. It's a matter of interest as well. At their age, are they interested in emergency services?
And maybe my challenge for some of you, particularly while you're all at home and don't get to go out, is to ask your other family members what they know, what they think about the service, because that is their data points that are going to be really helpful for you solving this problem. And with the generosity of this team here on Easter Sunday, when they could be eating chocolates, Easter Bunny bought something for me, I really want us to come up with some really interesting and exciting solutions for them.
I think if you look at this customer journey map, I like this one the most, the current one on the screen. And I think the pain points are
make sure I share the
parts of
with everybody.
The parts of awareness and consideration. If you look at these two columns, this is exactly the phase that we as a clinic need to focus on. That's Susan said that, and actually it's one of the things that I was very surprised when I started studying in RMIT, because the students there, basically, they are our market these are the potential customers of our clinic. And I was very surprised to learn that 90% of them never heard of our clinics before.
Can I also inject my comment?
And I think this is our design thinking problem. We need to find a ways to increase the awareness of people, but we need to put it in a way that it's not going to hurt our budget too much.
I would like to, if I may, I would like to differ. My personal opinion is that the industry of healthcare is an industry based and always has been based on word to mouth. It's a word to mouth industry. It takes time, and you need to have a pedigree of successes in order to be considered. To have a pedigree of a list of successes to be considered either as a medical provider, either as an ambulant provider, you must show people a record of saving lives. It's not that we don't have such a record, we have such a record. Now the question is such a record really a game breaker or a mind changer in decision of to join such an operation, buy into such an operation, buy a membership and enjoy such an operation, or maybe it's not so important. And it's going back to the issue of priority versus slow process of ear to mouth about a specific place. And it takes time. Yeah. The fact that we did a state-of-the-art ambulance service doesn't mean that tomorrow morning all Ho Chi Minh City starts to line up and to have a membership. But what I am actually hearing here is that maybe by aggressive marketing will bring more people in.
Well, I don't want us to focus on solutions. I want to understand the problem at this stage. But so
I think
how you change opinion is different from whether you need to change opinion, is what we're looking at here.
I think it takes time to change an opinion. It's a process.
Yeah.
It's not something that from today to tomorrow. And if we are going out into the community that we have saved the life and everybody knows about it, I doubt if today's news is not tomorrow's history, and people say, oh, okay, all right, nice to know. It won't change their mind in terms of joining in or joining out.
Yeah, I think
marketing and massive marketing is, I'm a bit head backwards with this thing, with the key opinion and all these things.
I tend to agree there. I think one of the things that the more I think of this business and try and see where we should be going, I almost think there should be less emphasis on subscription. We're trying to sell subscription. I think the emphasis should be on the value of the service, and if you need it, call us. Maybe the subscription, it's nice to have subscription and you've got every month you've got X number of dollars coming in because that can pay some of your running costs. It really is nice, but it never, ever, ever will sustain the business. And maybe our focus needs to be more on these are the quality outcomes you can have. This is the nature of the service. And personally, I would rather people just phone the ambulance more and more and more than start subscribing. It's $25 a year. And we spend a lot of time and effort getting people to spend $25 a year to subscribe. The focus should be users. So if you get one call, it's $80 or $220. Let's not get too hung up by the subscription model, but more about the value in the offering.
Interesting. Ken, You had your hand up before. You've got a question or an observation you want to share?
Yeah, because before I heard Susan said about like it's not fair for Rafi to do the campaign by himself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would like to ask about how's the network of you with the government, especially in the Ministry of Health. That have you discussed with them how we can nationwide educate people to think like about this an issue in the society?
Let me take you to a very. I'll answer you in a little bit different way so you understand. We are now in the process of prolonging our operation license in Vietnam, and the medical clinics is okay. Now it came to the ambulance service, because by WTO, Vietnam is not foreigners by WTO agreements done. There is nothing mentioned about ambulance services. So how are we going to chew it? So this thing is being chewed now up and down through every ministry named in this country. Ambulance service. We're talking here about an ambulance service. So when you talk about our relation with the government, I just want to give you the background, how difficult it is. Now, it's not that there is 15 different services. There is none. Now, we offered we don't want 115 to lose face. We want to work with you. No. Use us. No. Tell me what else should we do? Maybe you tell us what else should we do in order to participate with the Vietnamese government? Because I think we tried almost every venue.
Well, I suspect there's a how might we question for one of the groups. Someone who's interested in that, maybe that's the challenge that you should take on, is how might we work with the government in a productive way to achieve the health outcomes that you want to achieve. I mean, there are so many different ways of approaching this problem, and I've said to our partners here, I can't promise you that these people will come up with the solution by any chance, but they will come up with some great ideas, and they'll think about it in a way that perhaps you haven't before, which will help you think about it, I hope. But speaking of which, I want to actually play with a design thinking tool. We have so many questions that haven't been answered, but this has been a really productive conversation. Hopefully on the screen here, you can see some different, a list of different priorities, just a set of notes here. Actually, and in the chat, I have put a very long-winded, hopefully it's highlighted at the moment, very long-winded link to this board. I'm just wondering if the four of you from star 9999 would mind just using that link to go in, because I'd like you to have a vote on where you would like to see the students focus their priorities, and also if we need to add anything to this. So we don't actually, we've got customer awareness, but we don't have culture in there at the moment. I know you all think that's number one, so I don't really want to put it in, to be quite frank, but I'll put it in nonetheless. So when you come in, you're anonymous. You'll get some funny little thing, and I will turn this on to vote. So I'm going to ask my students not to vote on this. What we're doing is an exercise which, if we did this in a room, we'd use some dot stickers, and the idea is you just do it really quickly. One of the advantages of working online is you four can't see what the rest of you are voting on. Oh, goodness me. I can't see my screen well enough to, I just need to shut this down so I can see it. I'm going to start a voting session. And I'm going to set it at 3. So basically, once you're in there, if you can see, can you just give me an indication if you've been able to get in, the 4 of you?
Yeah.
Yep. So you should be able to see those post-it notes. And just by clicking on a note, we won't be able to see which ones you do. You've got 3 of them to click on as the 3 that you think are the most important. And it tells me 9 people are voting, but I only want 4 of you to vote. I'm just trusting my students not to vote.
I'm not able to get into this.
Oh, you're not able to get in?
No.
Oh, that's annoying.
It doesn't matter. I can tell you, you can put in my name.
Let's see if we can get the others in first. We've got 3. Okay, let me just see if we can have a look at what the votes are so far, and then we'll add you at the end. If anybody has been able to vote, doesn't look like you have. What's going on? Okay, that didn't work. The value of doing it that way is often that we call it the Hippo syndrome. The Hippo is the highest paid person in the office. And on the whole, people don't want to disagree with the Hippo. And actually, as Ian would know, as a South African, the hippos are the most dangerous animals in the whole of Africa, right? More people.
Yeah, but we're used to disagreeing with the hippos.
Yeah, well, the best hippos are the ones who will listen to disagreement, or even if they don't listen, will at least absorb it into their thinking. And so one of the benefits of doing, of basically having a silent vote, and I would suggest that you guys in your groups find ways to do silent votes on the issues, is because then you're getting the real perspective as opposed to everybody just going along with the crowd, the stuff that we talked about last time. So tell me, Rafi, what are the big 3? What do you think the big 3 that we need to deal with are?
Culture.
Culture.
Customer awareness.
Yep.
Making a call center available to a broader network.
Okay. I'll change the colours on those so that we can make them stand out. What about you, Jonathan? Anything different? Oh, you're muted, my friend. I can unmute you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Customer awareness.
Yep.
Yeah. Just a second. I have a problem.
No. Sorry. No, that's me. I made it. That was not my intention. Made it too hard for you to see. Customer awareness.
Yeah. I think making the call center available to a broader network and business model. Like Ian said, I think we need to think about the business model.
I said that one is so we've got those 2 the same. And this one. What about you, Ian?
We lost the culture. We don't see the culture.
Oh, we lost culture. Sorry. Sometimes I just try to be too clever, and clearly today is one of those days. Let's move that there. Okay, culture's is standing out by itself. It's not being a post-it note for the moment. Bring that in. Return to where I want to be. Let's have a look. Okay, culture. Ian, anything different?
I would say the biggest thing is getting people to understand what it is the offering is and how it differs. So customer awareness and culture almost goes hand in hand. And the call center, I've had lots of thoughts about call center is maybe making the call center the attraction and the ambulance as a byproduct of the call center, and adding different things into the call center. So making the call center available in a broader network is just not to more people, but more things available through the call center.
Like, so in Australia, we have one number for police, fire, ambulance.
No, not like that. It's more on a medical, because that's our business, but they can call in for bits of information. We could have a doctor in the call center permanently answering specific medical questions. That's forward thinking on the whole concept of making the alarm center the attraction and not the ambulance. Okay. The ambulance becomes a byproduct of the alarm center.
Cathryn, I'll give you just a better example to our students here.
Please.
Imagine that you start, okay, forget the 999. We have the structure. Now we want to start offering a service of tele-monitoring elderly with the handband ECGs.
Yep.
Now this data has to go somewhere, and that somewhere has to be a 24/7 center, which is a generic platform which runs also the 999 and can dispatch the ambulance if there's a need. Mm. So in another way, the story is about the flea, not about the cow. Okay? Yeah. And we turn it upside down. And slowly, we reverse the back to the cow as time moves on.
So the way I'm hearing you is that you would be open to ideas that are coming from this group around business models or services that incorporate the ambulance service or the call center as part of that, but that might expand on, because we're at risk now of going into solutions, which I know is what you want. That's solution. Everybody wants a solution, but we're trying to gather information about the problem at the moment. But if we're seeing this holistically, if the problem is how might we facilitate quality healthcare for Vietnamese people from cradle to grave, you could come up with a whole of life service that included emergency, but also monitoring, health checks, things like that.
Yeah.
The next challenge for these groups is going to be to define their problems. And if you're open to it, I'll come back with the problem definitions to you and you can tweak them, because I'd like them to give you useful information.
And that business model sticker goes into that call center attraction. That's the business model.
Well, why don't I take to the next one? Sorry, this is all locked here, I think. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring some of these down here. And what I want to do is use another tool, which we call the importance difficulty matrix. And we've got culture in there. I think I pulled culture down, did I? No. This is much easier to do with a whiteboard and some sticky notes. Let me just bring this up. So the idea of this tool is...
It was more fun in the class.
It's much more fun in the class. I'm sorry. So those of you who are having a great class, just listen to Jonathan. It would be better if we were together, but it's still good. Those of you who are hating what's going on right now, just know it would be better if we were in the classroom, and trust me to get us through it somehow. So what I'm actually asking you, what I'd love you to do is, what I'd really like to do is hand over the controls to you, Rafi, but instead I'm going to try and drive for you. I just want to get a sense, I think, particularly from Rafi, of what do you, if we think about culture, how important is it to solve from not very important to very important, and how difficult it is to solve? So this would be max difficulty, max importance, but not everything can sit up in that top corner. I want to work out, I'm already expecting that all of these things fit somewhere in this quadrant. They're very difficult. You're expecting them to be difficult to solve, and they're important to the solution. But I'd like to see if we could prioritize them in that box visually. So where would you put this one?
Very easy. Culture goes into impossible in both ways, so it's up there where you put it.
Okay.
the alarm center goes to important but very easy.
Okay.
Important but not difficult.
Okay.
Yeah, down
So
there.
it's going to be somewhere down here. How far along? Tell me when to stop.
Move it. It's very important, but it's very easy. So I don't know where it goes on this graph. I think maybe down left.
Okay. So this is the importance axis, and this is the difficulty.
Okay. So on the importance axis, it goes all the way to the right.
Okay.
The customer awareness, I would put at the middle, exactly at the middle of the graph. The pricing model, I don't think is important.
No, it's not important, and it's very easy.
It's not important, yes, it goes there. I think customer awareness and culture, I think goes somewhere between customer awareness and culture. Yes, right here. Make a business model, I don't know what it is and what it means. But the network, the other one, making calls, this is already we spoke about, this goes where it was down to the right.
Yeah.
Down here. So these are kind of two versions of the same.
One overlapping the other. The business model, the business model is a derivative of all these, so I would not put it anywhere.
What about you, Ian? Where would you put the business model?
I would say that the business model is the outcome of everything in the matrix.
I agree.
So then what we do is I'll just try and see if I can make that into I don't know how this works. That's what that means. I'll export this at the end for you guys, but the class have access to this board, they can play around with this. So from a class point of view, so this is the first time we've used this tool. Again, it's another visualization tool. It's really about trying to do a quick and dirty analysis of where should we spend our time? Where are we going to get the most benefit from our time? So you don't answer this, Jonathan, I know you know. So just from a class point of view, just seeing this, where do you think we should be strategically concentrating our efforts based on this quick analysis of these priorities? Go on, Ken, where would you spend your time and money?
Yeah, I think I would spend money for the customer awareness.
Customer awareness here. Why?
And the culture, because I think the thing now, the Star 999 is lack of awareness in public. Also, like how to raise awareness for customer to use ambulance service, not for the taxis in general.
Yeah. So well, and it's clearly the most important problem. Yeah. And it's like the culture piece.
So that's why
I put it here. It's the holy grail.
It's a combination between like to change behavior of people, behavior to think of ambulance, also to raise awareness of Star 999.
So okay, so I think you're right. I think that's the holy grail. That is the big problem to solve. So it's probably going to surprise you when I say, actually, based on this analysis, I think there is a lot of value in spending time down here. Why? Why strategically would I think that?
You get biggest return for your investment of time and money.
You go straight to the top of the class. Jason had his hand up. Where you're going to say something similar. Casey, hey, Casey, what have you got to add to the conversation here?
Yeah, well, I think when you talk about the call center, I think it was mentioned before that this isn't just a transportation service. This is I think it was called a mobile ICU. And so I think there's a negative connotations around ambulances within Vietnam where like they're not trustworthy. So I think it's changing the conversation. And if the call center gets you care faster, whether it be at a mobile ICU or at a hospital through transportation, that's where the conversation should be, right? So I think if you focus on that and you focus around the branding around that, that could actually help with the customer awareness as well. Kind of changing the conversation from an ambulance to critical care within a certain amount of time. Because it seems like the main KPI here, the key performance indicator, is time. As you shrink the time, you save more lives. So I think change the conversation from ambulance to maybe a call center could be beneficial in that effort.
Yeah, so that makes a really interesting how might we conversation. How might we change the conversation from ambulances to care? And refining that. You clearly need to refine it. Just from the teachable moment point of view, you do need to get some content from me. That's why they pay me the big bucks. Is ultimately this is a tool. It's a very quick and dirty tool for thinking strategically. And the thing is, if you don't, you need to solve all the important problems ultimately, right? So thinking about where best to spend your time and effort is also a strategic question. If you can never solve, if it turns out you can never solve this problem here, which you've identified as important, but it's likely to be easy, then you're never going to be able to solve that culture problem up the top. So actually, as we allocate our resources, this is effectively low-hanging fruit. These are the things that are easy to do that are going to make a huge difference. And because this is a wicked problem, I'm sure all of you pored over that lovely video I made for you, but wicked problems change as a consequence of the solutions that we employ. So as soon as we make a change to something, just COVID-19 is possibly one of the wickedest problems that this world has faced in the last 100 years. Whether, you know, regardless of how you approach it, there are things that are happening now. The way that our world is running is changed remarkably from 4 weeks ago. And so solutions are impacted by how we work. Our own ability to just do meetings like the one we're doing now, there are so many more of them than there were 4 weeks ago. This is the way of the world. And I suspect the way that business works going forward will be irrevocably changed as a consequence just of these kind of meetings. Sorry, Jonathan, you'll be having to do telehealth before you know it. None of those children sitting on your dinosaur bed. But because as we embed these changes, the nature of the other problem changes. So if we change a conversation about call centres, we're actually contributing to changing things like customer awareness and culture as well. So thinking strategically. Now, where this becomes really important is later on, you're going to be testing these solutions. First, you're going to go out broad, come up with lots of divergent solutions, and then you're going to figure out ways to test whether they're going to work or not. I'm hoping you'll be prototyping some of them, that you will be identifying the different test mechanisms, because this, as much as it's all about creativity, this subject, it's creativity to solve a problem. If we don't end up with a solution, then we've failed, right? We might have lots of iterative solutions along the way. So we spend our money and our time where we're likely to get the most value, which I think is pretty much what Ian's words were. Now, I'm aware that we've just hit our 90 minutes. I don't want to abuse the time of our partners here. Are you happy to take any class questions, or do we need to wrap up?
Before you wrap up, can I say something to your students? If they were to put their thinking hats on and basically help this project reach more people through awareness, I'd like to actually also put in one more vote on funding.
Oh, sorry, I didn't get to you.
No problem, no problem. If funding is something we lack, right? I would like your students to at least, have that in mind before they start coming with creative solutions or ideas, because that is one big factor to consider as well.
So the lens that each of these students will ultimately have to put their proposals through is one, it's basically pretty simple, 3 elements: desirability, feasibility, and viability.
Okay.
So, which is as simple as, do they want it? And they here really goes to all of the stakeholders that are involved. So will it work for you? And that's one of the reasons why I was so pleased to have a range of stakeholders from your business, because what each of you sees as success may not be the same thing. But is it something that will work for your customers in the context that you're in? So that's the desirability. Then we've got the feasibility. Can you do it? So can you do it goes to also to the resources that you have available to you, the technologies that are available to do it. You know, like I'm sure all of us would love to solve the tiny narrow streets of Vietnam with some kind of teleporting equipment. Wouldn't that be awesome? But clearly that's not feasible. You know, Dr. Spock has not yet landed on this planet, sadly. And then there's the viability, which goes to should we do it? So that goes to profitability, goes to the question of funding as well. I think it also, from my point of view, it also goes to ethics. Is it the right thing to do? It's the question about sustainability. It's a question about how this fits into the mission and the vision of your business as a whole. So one of the things that I would have wanted to point out is right at the very beginning when Rafi was introducing why this business, and I'm being a bit of a devil's advocate here, you know, and I hope that you all know that I'm sort of trying to push out to get some interesting conversation and to see where the sharp edges are. But one of the first things Rafi said was, actually, this is about the health service. Yes, we need to fund it, but it's not about the money. It's part of the bigger business. So it's also for you to understand, just because it's not about the money doesn't mean that there's unlimited funds. It's like, actually, it needs to be feasible, it needs to be sustainable, it needs to be viable, but it also needs to solve the problem. And that's the lens ultimately you're going to check your solutions through. Do we have any questions, concerns, observations, frustrations, compliments, thank yous?
I just before everybody goes, I want us to explain, to tell the students again, that I'm looking at this graph that you've made, Cathryn, that no matter how good our generic platform is for other kinds of services, it still needs awareness by public. So it's a chicken and the egg. Yes, exactly.
So these things are ultimately linked to each other. Let me see if I can.
Yes. The fact that we have a great service, again, doesn't mean that people will come and we'll start the whole story from scratch. And we'll be back to point one.
Okay.
So these two are inevitably a chicken and egg relationship.
Yeah. Any questions, concerns from the floor? Casey?
Yeah, I had a question. Yeah, I had a question around, I guess, desired outcomes by your customers. I've heard the term time saved used a lot during the call today. And I'm wondering if objectively, if you have any information to share based on your data, like how much time do you actually save your customers and how does that time equate to desired outcomes such as saving lives compared to public offerings or a taxi or a Grab?
We, every call, okay, this is the American system is an American system. It's extremely accountable. Every call is recorded. It's running by time, seconds and minutes. You know exactly where the car is, where the car was, when the car arrived, and what was the outcome of the case. Now we know our outcomes, but to compare it to a Grab or to someone else, I'll give you an example. Someone has severe chest pain and he's got a heart attack. He gets into a Grab, he reaches a hospital, it takes him 20 minutes, and he made it. You call an ambulance, they came in 6 minutes, they brought him to the hospital, he made it. It's very difficult to go backwards and say, okay, who was better? Nobody pushes it to the edge of the envelope in such a way, but we know our times and we know the outcome of our cases. Now we have cases of people who were who had a cardiac arrest, and we revived them. We have these cases, but that's not fair because if you want to compare with Grab, you really have to compare apples to apples. because this is not comparing apples to apples. This is completely two different things. Obviously, in the Grab taxi, I mean, someone would have to, bring him down in a body bag.
I think that's my point, is how many more people come out in a body bag using Grab as opposed to your service would be like, maybe not looking at the desirable outcome, but the undesirable outcome. I don't know if that data exists, but I'm just curious if you thought about those kind of studies.
Not too many.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not a doctor, but for me, it goes beyond that as well. Yes, we want people to arrive alive, but the other thing is, what's the quality of life after the event? The sooner you can have intervention, the better the quality of life after the event. And that's an important aspect of what we do, and the intervention and the dispensing medical advice right from the first second you phone. It's also adding value to post the event.
I think there's also another issue that you wouldn't necessarily pick up from that kind of data is additional damage that is done when you select the wrong.
Yeah,
don't go in an ambulance.
Quality of life
told me some outrageous stories, but those of us who know anything about first aid know that when somebody has hurt their back, you don't want to move them. And then yet, what's happening on a busy street in Saigon when somebody comes off a motorbike is they've just been dragged over to the side of the road so motorbikes can go around them.
Jonathan, you want to say something? I can see you.
Had the story from Complong, but it's too long. It's irrelevant. About the patient who arrived in trauma.
About his toes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now the thing is, it's not just how fast. Again, it's not just how fast you get to the hospital. It's what time the treatment actually starts. So
yeah, I think back to my original question, it's not about getting to the hospital. It's about the outcome of getting care to the person faster. So I don't care if it's the hospital. I don't care where the care is administered. So my question isn't around like a hospital. It's around care, how fast you get care
exactly
to the person, right? And I'm just curious if there's been any studies done by you or by anybody else, whether in Vietnam or any other markets, where it's like 1 minute of care arriving to your customer faster equates to something, some sort of positive outcome.
Yes, there is an American study. First of all, there is a notion worldwide that where you have such care services, the mortality goes down by 20%. And that's a huge number. That means that 5 people which would be dead, now there are only 4. Now 20% in medicine is a mega number. And there is a very good American study, huge study, which correlates the time when ambulance is coming with the outcome of releasing people out of hospital. I mean, what you do is you compare hospital stay versus ambulance speed of response. And you clearly note that patients who had, it was done on, I think, on cardiac patients, I think they classified to cardiac patients, that cardiac patients stayed, I think, quarter or more or less of the time less in hospital as a result of being brought earlier.
That makes sense. So would you...
A very famous American study.
As a follow-up to that, would you feel confident that that 20% applies to your service as compared to your competitive service within Vietnam?
It's hard for me to compare my service compared to a control group, which is the public, because I don't know, because nobody counts these things here. Because if you use taxis, obviously there is no census.
Yeah. So the public data doesn't exist for you to do control. Yeah. Okay.
You're a dot on a graph. Now, are you high or are you low compared to what? You can't say.
Okay. Thank you.
So at that point, sound has dropped out of our recording as I basically came back on another computer. You might have noticed I dropped out towards the end there. But effectively, at that stage, all I did was thank the group that had visited us and been so generous with their information and their trust in you to come up with some design thinking solutions. So, and we thank them. Your next steps. The first thing I want each of the groups to do is really try and come up with your problem definition. Remember when you did the wallet project, and after gathering as much information as you could about the partner that you had, the challenge for you was then to try and think of a problem definition, what it is based on the insights that you had that would make their lives better. Based on the insights that you've got out of this meeting and the work you've done so far, I want you to try and hone in on more specifically into an area that you are going to focus on in your group. We will do some more exercises to really understand the problem better. In particular, you'll be challenged to develop some personas and to start to draw out some of the journey maps a little bit more. But starting from next week, we're going to start to do some ideation exercises. But in order to solve a problem, we need to know what the problem is. So the next step is for each of the groups to come back to me with a how might we statement. It's important. I'll make you a little video about that probably later today or tomorrow. So you'll see some more content being eked out from me over the course of the week. So most of the groups who've come back to me have set up a regular meeting time towards the end of the week. And I'm hoping that you will do your problem definition at that stage. Fabulous meeting, guys. For those of you who weren't able to come, thank you for sticking around for this long. And I'm looking forward to next week and to debrief with you. Take care.